So I want to go for a second first to Ephesians chapter 4. We're going to go back to 1 Samuel, but for now let's start in Ephesians chapter 4, verses 17 through 25. And normally our air conditioning works too, but for some reason there's a sensor that's tripped when we start the new year, so we're getting that looked at this week. So that's also why I'm kind of hot and sweaty. Also, I took a hot bath just a second ago in front of you all. So yeah, I'm going to be sweating quite a bit. Ephesians 4, 17 through 25. Paul is writing to some new believers in Ephesus, and he says this to them when he says in verse 17, "So I say this, and affirm in the Lord, that you are to no longer walk just as the Gentiles walk." By that he means unbelievers, right? That was a synonym. No longer as the Gentiles also walk, in the futility of their minds, being darkened in their understanding, excluded from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them, because of the hardness of their heart. And they, having become callous, have given themselves up to indecent behavior for the practice of every kind of impurity with greediness. And now, I say this to our new people that were just baptized, right? You did not learn Christ this way, right? If indeed you have heard him and have been taught in him, just as truth is in Jesus. That is, in reference to your former way of life, you are to rid yourselves of the old self, which is being corrupted in accordance with lusts of deceit, and that you are to be renewed in the spirit of your minds, and to put on the new self, which in the likeness of God has been created in righteousness and holiness of the truth. So this is a new way to act. Not like you used to do, not like unbelievers, right? Therefore, verse 25, ridding yourselves of falsehood, speak truth, each one of you, with his neighbor, because we are parts of one another. Wow. So that's Paul making a plea that as believers in Christ Jesus, we are to put aside falsehood. We are no longer to be dishonest, but we are instead to speak the truth to one another. Tell the truth. Now, I want to go back to 1 Samuel, chapter 21. Sometimes people have trouble with the truth. Lying can be a difficult problem. It's a sin. I one time heard Chuck Swindoll give a sermon. And the week before, he said, I want all of you to go ahead and read, let's say he said, read 1 Samuel chapter 32 for next week's homework. Right? He said, read 1 Samuel 32 for next week's homework. And as some of you are looking that up, right, you come back next week and you report on it if you read it. So then the week came and he says, okay, if you this past week did the homework and read 1 Samuel 32, go ahead and stand up. And some people stood up. And he said, you just lied to each other. There is no 32. There is no 1 Samuel 32. You all just lied. Because if they had looked it up, they would have known there is no 1 Samuel chapter 32. Oh my goodness, that takes some guts. He called them out. Shame on them for standing. Right? Shame on them for standing. Lying. It's not good. Unfortunately, unsaved people lie, and even saved people lie. We can get so easily caught up in the panic mode of lying, and some people lie to get out of trouble. What did you do? Did you take that? My dogs don't lie, by the way. Have you noticed that your dogs, what did you do? Did you get in the garbage? And their ears go, I did. I got into the garbage. I'm sorry. Okay. Right? But kids, they lie. Adults lie. Some people are lying to get out of trouble. Other people lie to make themselves look good. You know, we were fishing yesterday, Gavin and I, and we caught a bunch of fish. And his fish was probably this big, and mine was probably half an inch shorter than his fish. Not fair. But lying can be a real problem. We're going to look at David now in 1 Samuel chapter 21, not 32, 21. 1 Samuel 21. And we've been following David as he's been running for his life from Saul. Now, David has been serving the Lord. He stood up to Goliath, the man that defied God and the armies of Israel, and said, your God is nothing, and I'm going to kill all of you. And David said, no, you're not. God will protect me and deliver me from your hand. Sure enough, he slayed Goliath. There's a massive victory. You would think after that, right? Everybody goes, yay, David. And they did, except for the guy that was currently in charge, King Saul, who God had already said, Saul, you have disobeyed me enough. You're out. You're out. I don't want you to be the king anymore, and I'm going to put someone in to replace you. Okay? Saul didn't take that too well. And so when he finally figures out David's the new guy, he wants to have him killed. So he tries very hard over the last few chapters to have him killed. David is running for his life. Saul's son, Jonathan, is best friends with David. They make a covenant, and Jonathan helps David escape. But now David is on the run. He's running for his life. And so now we come to chapter 21, verse 1, and I'll read these 15 verses here. Then David came to Nob, to Ahimelech. We always say Ahimelech in English, but I just learned this week it's Ahimelech, the priest. And Ahimelech came trembling to meet David, and he said to him, why are you alone? Why are you alone? And no one with you? Well, then David said to Ahimelech, the priest, the king has commissioned me with a matter and has said to me, no one is to know anything about the matter on which I am sending you and with which I have commissioned you. And I have directed the young men to a certain place. And now then, what do you have on hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread or whatever can be found. The priest answered David and said, there's no ordinary bread on hand, but there is the consecrated bread, if only the young men have kept themselves from women. David answered the priest and said, be assured, women have been denied to us as previously when I left, and the bodies of the young men were consecrated. Though it was an ordinary journey, how much more then will their bodies be consecrated today? So the priest gave him the consecrated bread, for there was no bread there except the bread of the presence, which was removed from its place before the Lord, in order to put hot bread in its place on the day it was taken away. Now, one of the servants of Saul was there that day, detained before the Lord, and his name was Doeg the Edomite. I like to call him Doug. Let's call him Doug the Edomite. And Doug was the chief of Saul's shepherds. So David said to Ahimelech, now is there no spear or sword on hand? For I brought neither my sword nor my weapons with me because the king's matter was urgent. And then the priest said, well, the sword of Goliath, the Philistine whom you killed in the valley of Elah, behold, it's wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If you would take it for yourself, take it, for there is no other except it here. And David said, well, there is none like it. Give it to me. And then David set out and fled that day from Saul, and he went to Achish, the king of Gath. But the servants of Achish said to him, is this not David, the king of the land? Did they not sing of this one as they danced? Saul has slain his thousands and David his 10,000s. David took these words to heart, and he greatly feared Achish, king of Gath. So he disguised his sanity while in their sight, and he acted insanely in their custody, and he scribbled on the doors of the gate, and he drooled in his beard. And then Achish said to his servants, look, you see this man? He's behaving like an insane person. Why did you bring him to me? Do I lack insane people that you have brought this one to behave like an insane person in my presence? Shall this one come into my house? May God add his blessing to the reading of his word. There's a lot to be said here. We don't have a lot of time to get into it, but I do want to impress upon us the problem with lying. We read a passage like this, and it sure looks like everything works out well for David. He's in a time, he doesn't have time for this. He just needs to get things done, and he's running for his life, and there's a lot at stake here, and he's the Lord's anointed anyway, so just lie and get it over with and move on. And I think sometimes in our lives, we can tend to think that way. You know, it's just easier to lie, and then I'll deal with it later. It's just quicker if I could just lie. And the problem is, in this situation, it works. The lie helps David. The lies help David. He lies about being there for the king, right? And it works, and he gets the food, he gets the bread, he gets the weapon, right? And then he lies about being insane. He's tricking the people, and it works. They say, we don't want this guy. Get him out of here. But there are consequences for David's lies. And if you read 21 by itself, you might think lying would be a good idea in certain situations, right? There are consequences. There are problems with lying. And David is about to find that out. So I've got 4 reasons not to lie based on these passages, or this passage. Number 1, the first reason we should not lie, and it's in your bulletins if you have one, our lying robs other people of their choice. Our lying robs people of their choice. Ahimelech didn't even have the option to help David freely, right? So in verse 1, David came to Nob, to Ahimelech the priest, and Ahimelech came trembling to meet David. And he said, why are you alone and no one with you? Why do you think he's trembling? Why do you think? He's probably scared because there's something wrong between David and Saul. This is not good. Since when does the captain of the king's bodyguard show up by himself? What's going on? They didn't exactly have social media or C-SPAN to tell everybody, by the way, this man has resigned, from the cabinet, and Saul wants him dead. So he's terrified. But then David says, by the way, okay. Why have I come here alone? Good question. So the king has commissioned me with a matter, and he said to me, no one is to know anything about this. So don't bother checking my story, by the way, because no one's supposed to know. And I'm not even supposed to tell you. Right? And I've directed the young men to a certain place, so that's why they're not here. Right? So he lies, and now Ahimelech is like, okay, that answers that question. Sure, I'll help you. And he gives him food. Now this bread of the presence, this showbread or the bread of the presence, every Sabbath they would take 12 loaves of bread. And each loaf, it's a loaf. Ladies, when you make a loaf of bread, how many of you make homemade bread? Raise your hand. Just 2, 3. Okay. It's very good when you make it, by the way. And how much flour do you put in a batch of bread? 8 cups. How much is that? Is it like a gallon? Well, much of a bag. So half a gallon. This bread that they make, right? Each of these 12 loaves contains just under 1 gallon of flour. A gallon. So it's like, that's what he's got there. And every Sabbath day, like they would put out fresh hot bread that the priest made, and then they would replace it every Sabbath day with new bread. What happens to the old bread that's been sitting in front of God for a week? The priests get to eat it. Okay, now it's not lawful for David to eat this bread, but there's an extenuating circumstance. He and his men are hungry, they're in need, and as a matter of fact, if you look into it, you can read this in Matthew 12, Mark 2, or Luke 6, where Jesus is commenting about the Sabbath, saying sometimes there's extenuating circumstances. And it's lawful to do things that are not lawful, right? He was talking about his disciples going through the fields, collecting grain and eating it, okay? I don't want to get us too far off topic. But David doesn't give Ahimelech a choice. David doesn't even get the option to freely help David, or Ahimelech doesn't even get the option to freely help David. When we lie to someone, we take away their free will. We take away their option. Does that make sense? They no longer have the ability to freely give something. It's like we force them because they don't know the whole truth. And that's what's happening here. We don't trust them to treat us in a certain way, so we lie and take away the choice from them. They don't even get the option to respond properly or as we want because we're lying about it. Lying is wrong. Our lying really takes away that person's consent. They don't have an option. They're going to go based on the other knowledge that you have put out there. Number 2, the second reason not to lie is that our lying puts others in danger, or it can put others in danger, like happened here. So, right, we go on, the priest answered, there's no bread other than this holy bread, but your men have to be kept themselves pure. And David says, oh, of course, which I don't know if that's true. I don't know. It doesn't tell us for sure, because he's on a roll here, lying. And so the priest gave him the consecrated bread. Now look at verse 7. Now one of the servants of Saul was there that day, detained before the Lord, and his name was Doeg, the Edomite, the chief of Saul's shepherds. See, God is in control of everything. God is paying attention. And Doeg is still there. Okay? Doeg is not a good guy. He's a child, a descendant of Esau. You know, Jacob and Esau, he's one of Esau's descendants. And he works for Saul. And he's paying attention. And some terrible tragedy is about to happen because of this lie, because God has somehow made it so that Doeg would be there, right? Detained before the Lord. He witnesses this. So then, we'll get to this maybe later, when Saul catches up with Ahimelech and finds out after David escapes, and what happens? The king says, you shall certainly die, Ahimelech, you and all your father's household. And the king said to the guards who were attending him, turn around and put the priests of the Lord to death, because their hand also was with David, and because they knew that he was fleeing and did not inform me. They did not know, but he thinks they did. But the servants of the king were unwilling to reach out with their hands to attack the priests of the Lord. Then the king said to Doeg, I'll just call him Doeg, right? You turn around and attack the priests. So Doeg the Edomite turned around and attacked the priests, and he killed on that day 85 men who wore the linen ephod. He killed 85 priests. And he also struck Nob, the city of the priests, with the edge of the sword, both the men and the women and the children and the babies, the infants. He also killed their donkeys, their oxen, their sheep. with the edge of the sword. But one son of Ahimelech escaped, the son of Ahitub, named Abiathar. He escaped and he fled to David, and Abiathar informed David that Saul had killed the priests of the Lord. And then David said to Abiathar, I knew on that day when Doeg the Edomite was there that he would certainly tell Saul, I myself have turned against every person in your father's household. Stay with me. Do not be afraid, even though he who is seeking my life is seeking your life, for you are safe with me. He even says, it's my fault. And it kind of was. He lied about it. Now, Saul is ultimately responsible. Saul will receive the punishment and has received his punishment, right? And so did Doeg. But our lying puts other people in danger. Our lying also shows, number 3, that we don't trust God. We don't trust God. I heard one commentator say now, and you look at verses 8 and 9, now is there no spear or sword on hand? For I brought neither sword or my weapons with me, because the king's matter was urgent. The priest said, the sword of Goliath and the Philistine whom you killed in the valley of Elah, behold, it is wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If you would take it for yourself, take it, for there's none other here except it. And David said, there is none like it, give it to me. One commentator said it this way, when he said, right, David has become Goliath. David has become Goliath. He has now got Goliath's sword. How helpful was that sword to Goliath? That amazing sword, there's none like it. How helpful was it? Did it help Goliath? No. It actually cut his own head off. David used it to cut Goliath's head off. And it's very, very interesting because in 1 Samuel 17:47, this is what it says. 1 Samuel 17:47. David says this, and that this entire assembly may know that the Lord does not save by sword or by spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will hand you over to us. David's own words. And now he's begging for a sword. The same sword that Goliath had on him when he said those words. God doesn't need a sword or spear to deliver. You're in trouble. What happened, David? Where'd your faith go? And our lying shows that we don't trust God. We can also look at Psalm 56. I'm just going to speed this up. That is what happens. David writes a couple Psalms. He writes Psalm 56 and Psalm 34 in this time when he is captured by the Philistines. So he goes to Goliath's hometown armed with Goliath's sword. He goes to Gath. He switched from Israel, and now he is going to the Philistines to be with them. Wow, he has really switched. He's not trusting in God. He's lying. And our lying hurts our reputation. You can read Psalm 34, and that's about the time when David is drooling on himself. This is a child of God. This is David. Right? He's God's anointed one. He's the future king of Israel. He is the man after God's own heart. He's a lion killer. He's the giant slayer. He is the captain of brave and mighty troops. He's the psalmist. And he's so afraid. And he's lost his focus that he is now drooling on himself and coloring on the walls. That looks really good for a captain of the Lord's army. As a Christian, we are royalty in Christ. We are children of the King, sons and daughters of the King himself. And when we lie to get out of things because we are afraid, we are saying, we don't trust you, God. We don't trust the King to save us, to deliver us. How does that look? How do you think that makes God look when his own children can't trust him? Whenever we lie, We're saying we don't trust God. So I would challenge you this week to make a decision. This week, don't lie this week, okay? Make a decision not to lie this week, right? And if you do happen to lie, here's what you do. You, as soon as possible, go back to the person you lied to and said, I'm sorry, I lied. This is what I actually should have said. Please forgive me. You start having to do that this week, guess what? Your initial lies are going to come right, you're going to stop. Because how many times are you going to want to have to go, Dylan, I'm sorry, I lied to you this week when I said I couldn't do it. Actually, I can do it, I just don't want to. Oof. Right? Now, I don't need to, there's within reason, right? There's being mean and telling the truth, like honey, that dress does make you look fat. No, that's not what we're talking about, okay? We're talking about telling the truth in love, you know? But make that decision, make that commitment not to lie this week. And that's what God wants us to do, to no longer speak falsehood to one another, but to speak the truth, because we're members with one another, all right? And I know this is going to cost David. He's going to have this terrible slaughter that he will not know if he had a part in. He feels guilty enough for it. Yeah. If he had done the right thing, he wouldn't have that on his conscience.